All right, let's dive into two terms that, on the surface, seem almost identical but are actually worlds apart in behavioral science: imitation and observational learning. If you've ever wondered how we really learn by watching somebody else, stick around, because we're about to make that distinction super clear.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big idea of learning from others. Then we'll zoom in on imitation and its four very strict rules. After that, we'll pull back to look at observational learning, which is the bigger picture. And the most important part, we'll pinpoint the crucial difference between them and then see how it all plays out in the real world.
So let's kick things off with a question that really gets to the heart of it all. I mean, think about it. How do we learn so much just by watching? You see a kid figuring out how to tie their shoes by watching a parent, or maybe you pull up a video to learn a new recipe. This is so fundamental to who we are, and you know what? Behavior analysis gives us the exact tools to break down how it actually works.
Okay, first up, imitation. Now, in day-to-day conversation, we use imitation to mean just, copying someone. But for a behavior analyst, it's a super technical term with a really strict definition. The best way to think about it, it's like making a perfect, instantaneous carbon copy of a behavior. Right, so for any behavior to officially count as imitation, it has to pass four pretty tough tests. It isn't just any old kind of copying. Nope, it's a very specific event that's controlled by very specific things. So let's break down exactly what those rules are. Okay, so here are the four non-negotiables. First, the model's action has to be the trigger that sets everything off. Second, your copy has to have what we call formal similarity. It's got to look or sound just like the original. Third, it has to be immediate. We're talking within like 3 to 5 seconds. And fourth, and this one is the real kicker, the behavior happens because you saw the model do it, not because someone said, "Hey, do this." Picture a dance class. The instructor shows a new move. That's our model. The students right away copy it exactly. That hits immediacy and formal similarity. And they're doing it because they saw her do it, not because she said, "Okay, now you go." See? All four rules are met. That right there is pure imitation. So if imitation is that perfect, precise carbon copy, then observational learning, well, that's the whole library. It's a much, much broader concept. Imitation can be part of it, for sure, but observational learning goes way beyond just copying. It's about getting the lesson behind the action.
The absolute key phrase here is, "and the consequences of their actions." This is the game changer. With observational learning, you're not just watching what somebody does, you're watching what happens to them as a result. You can learn the entire lesson without ever trying the behavior yourself or getting any direct feedback. The psychologist Albert Bandura gave us a really handy framework for this. He said for this kind of learning to happen, a few things need to line up. First, you've got to actually pay attention to the model. Makes sense, right? Then you have to retain it. You've got to remember what you saw. You also have to be physically able to reproduce the action. And finally, and this is so important, you need the motivation to do it. And where does that motivation usually come from? From seeing the consequences that happened to the person you were watching.
Okay, so we've got our two definitions down. Now we're getting to the absolute core of this whole thing, the single biggest difference between imitation and observational learning. And honestly, it all boils down to one simple question. What's actually in the driver's seat? What's controlling the behavior? And here it is, plain and simple. For imitation, the controller is the model's action itself. You see it, you do it, boom. But for observational learning, the controller is way more complex. It's the whole package, the model's action plus the consequence that followed. This little breakdown really lays it all out. You see, with imitation, the consequence is direct. You get praised for copying it just right. With observational learning, the consequence is vicarious. They get the praise or the punishment, and you learn just by watching. And that's exactly why imitation has to be an exact match. But with observational learning, the behavior you end up doing might look totally different, or maybe you learn to not do anything at all. Let's make this super real. This is something called vicarious reinforcement. Imagine a classroom. One student, let's call her Sarah, raises her hand, and the teacher says, "Sarah, thank you for raising your hand." Now, another student, maybe Leo, sees this happen. That praise that Sarah got makes it way more likely that Leo is going to raise his hand next time. Leo learned from the good thing he saw happen to someone else. And of course, it works in the other direction too. We call this vicarious punishment. You're driving down the highway, maybe going just a little over the speed limit, and then you see those flashing lights up ahead. Someone's getting pulled over. What's the first thing you do?
You check your speed and slow down, right? You just learned what not to do by seeing the negative consequence someone else got. You didn't need the ticket yourself. Now that is some powerful, efficient learning.
So, who cares? Why does getting this difference right actually matter? Well, it matters a ton. Because when we understand what's really controlling the behavior, is it just the action, or is it the whole action plus consequence package? We can design way more effective ways to teach people new skills. A perfect example of this in practice is video modeling. This is an incredible tool where someone might watch a video of a peer doing a skill correctly, or they might watch from a first-person point of view. Or, and this is really cool, they might watch a cleverly edited video of themselves performing a skill perfectly. These techniques are so powerful because they tap directly into the principles of both imitation and observational learning.
You know, if you're looking for one simple way to remember all this, here's my favorite analogy. Imitation is like a chef following a recipe down to the last gram to make an exact copy of a dish. Observational learning is like a student watching a master chef at work, not just copying the motions, but understanding the principles of cooking, and then going on to create their own amazing, unique meal. One is just copying, the other is true understanding.
So, I'll leave you with a question to think about. Now that you can see the difference between just copying an action versus really learning from an outcome, how might that change the way you try to teach someone a new skill? Or even how you approach learning something new yourself? It's definitely something to think about.
Thanks so much for tuning in.